growing trade, development of investment cooperation and daily direct flights between the capitals with a frequency of 15 times a week.
It's very easy to be the ambassador of Denmark in Ukraine.
Find out why relations between Ukraine and Denmark are in their heyday in the program Touchpoints. Preliminary results of 2018 revealed that total trade between Ukraine and Denmark increased by almost 20%. More than 150 Danish companies work in Ukraine in the agricultural, IT, energy and light industry sectors. Dynamic economic development of any country and cooperation between countries is always based on active political dialogue.
It's very active, and I have to say I can best describe it by saying it's very excellent also. We have had in recent years very frequent contacts on all levels, but to start with the highest level, your president was in Denmark in the spring of 2017, April. The year before, the Danish Prime Minister was here. This year in June, Ukrainian Prime Minister was in Copenhagen. That was for the Ukraine Reform Conference, which was a reform conference to show the world how far Ukraine has gotten with reforms. And it was hosted jointly by the two prime ministers. It was not a Danish conference, not a Ukrainian, it was a shared one. And of course, so there you see we have high-level contacts. We have had many other ministers on all levels, defense ministers, foreign affairs ministers. And our foreign affairs minister will come back to Ukraine in late January next year, we expect. But other levels, institutions, perhaps most proudly I can say that people-to-people contacts have become much more frequent and close. And of course it's due to two simple facts. Visa-free travel has made it much more easy for Ukrainians to go and see Denmark. And then the other side of that good coin, we have now much more connections. There are several connections per day now, more than 15, 16 directly between Kiev and Copenhagen per week. And similarly also now from Lviv, and I think I saw one from Kharkiv to Denmark. And the Danes come here because of those connections, of course, and because they have a strong interest. For them it's a very interesting world. They have a lot of sympathy for Ukraine, I would say, on all these levels, from the highest to the people-to-people. There's a lot of sympathy. There's full support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. They understand how offended people are because it's been an aggressive attempt to take parts of Ukraine. And their solidarity is clearly, among those Danes I meet at least, it's always clearly on the Ukrainian side.
Consultations on implementation of anti-corruption laws became an important stage in the country's cooperation. After all, Ambassador Ruben Madsen explains constant leadership of Denmark among the happiest countries primarily by chronic rejection of bribery in Danish society.
We have in Denmark always very high scores on happiness. It's more about trust in society. People trust each other. So this way of building trust, going all the way, helping people if somebody has a problem, that has developed over centuries. It is because we have developed very good human relations across the society and have managed to build this trust, which is also very important in politics, because if you do not display trust in politics, you'll not have a chance. You need to understand that that's what people would expect for you. That's also why corruption has very difficult terms to survive.
It is no coincidence that upon the initiative of the European Union, Denmark became Ukraine's main consultant on the fight against corruption.
Denmark has been entrusted by the EU and other member states to do is to implement the EU anti-corruption initiative. So that's a special chapter for us. It is the biggest anti-corruption initiative the EU has anywhere in the world. The aim of that is to assist Ukraine in fighting corruption. It's Ukraine that fights corruption. We assist as best we can, and we assist in the way that we help to build independent institutions, capacity build them, give them IT equipment, give them plans, make sure they have good and rich contacts with European similar branches. They come to bring European standards, of course, to Ukraine. So we're very proud to see those institutions become stronger and stronger.
Ambassador of Denmark in Ukraine, Ruben Madsen, noted that the law on the High Anti-Corruption Court adopted last summer became the final step to establishing an effective anti-bribery policy. As for Denmark, this country is repeatedly included in the top 10 least corrupt countries in the world.
You have civil society groups, you have businessmen, you have others who are very dedicated in their attempts to get rid of corruption. After all, it's a big thing in all countries. Denmark was corrupt once. We've been very fortunate in recent decades to be able to say that we hardly have any, but we still have to be very, very careful, because it can always develop if you're not on top of it. Corruption is not at all accepted by Danes in general. They get very furious when they hear examples of it. And an example I often tell is about businessmen. Danish businessmen will not touch corruption nowadays. Why should they risk it? Because they feel they risk their jobs. Even a CEO could lose the job if she is seen to be connected to having accepted corruption. And we would like to help Ukraine get to the same point. It would be fantastic if we could soon get to a point where everybody will say there's no impunity for corruption in Ukraine anymore. That would be a terrific step forward.
According to the ambassador of Denmark, another positive factor in combating the shadow economy and illegal business was the creation of the National Agency of Ukraine for finding, tracing and managing assets derived from corruption and other crimes. At the beginning of 2018, the agency provided revenues to the state budget of Ukraine in the amount of 4.8 million Ukrainian hryvnias.
And it's there to get the assets back, taxes, embezzled money taken away from the Ukrainian state, to get them back and to get them into the tax coffins of Ukrainians, to pay for healthcare, social care and so on. And it's a new institution. It's been there for a bit more than a year, but it already had some very remarkable results. It should be contested, but if you're contested in a court, there will be no, AMA will not take away and freeze money if it doesn't have a verdict of the judge. So it's done as part of rule of law.
The introduction of Euro standards also works. According to the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business ranking 2018, Ukraine rose by 4 positions compared with 2017. Ranking 76th among 190 countries of the world. Increasing the number of Danish companies that are exploring the idea of running a business in Ukraine also signifies the growing interest in investment into the Ukrainian economy.
For almost more than 20 years it started, and today we have several hundred Danish companies active in Ukraine. And in many different businesses, production businesses, in wood industry, producing shoes. Several Danish companies investing here in IT. Ukrainian IT engineers are extremely clever. Agricultural production has also become a stronghold of Danish investment. We know that Ukraine, like Denmark, has been a breadbasket. Denmark was the breadbasket of the north. Ukraine was of the east. We both have been feeding populations much larger than our own. And you can feel here and sense that there's an experience in agricultural production that goes back hundreds of years. And that's why I think the Danish investments in primary agricultural production has been extremely successful. We have a big investment also in beer production, and a leading Danish brewery is concentrating much on this, not only on its own, or I would say not particularly on its own, by building up local brands.
Green energy is also an important sphere of interaction. Denmark is recognized as the global leader in the production of wind energy. By 2050, the country plans to ensure 100% of its energy needs from renewable energy resources.
We do support Ukraine in all areas, I would say, and the other primary one I would say is in the field of energy. We've been active here for more than 3 years, assisting in building up what we call the Ukraine-Denmark Energy Center. We think it's been working very, very well, and every time we speak to Ukrainians on high level, in the Ministry of Energy, we always hear about the fine results we have from that UDEC cooperation. But in that cooperation, we focus on very important issues like renewables. It's a clean way of having energy. We already have many Danish windmills in Ukraine, in west and in the south. We also focus to some extent on solar. Solar is not in the same way a very strong hold in Denmark as wind is, but we also have a lot of companies that deal in solar.
In addition, Denmark has been actively introducing an effective energy-saving policy for several decades. The achievement of complete energy independence applies to all segments of the economy, namely heat, electricity, and transport.
Perhaps the most important energy we can find, that's the energy we save by energy efficiency. The investment will have a payback time of perhaps 2 years if you go into energy efficiency. We do that also in, I would like to mention, district heating is a very strong tradition in Denmark. You have the same tradition from the old times in Ukraine. These two really taking care of your energy situation, renewables and energy efficiency savings, also help a lot on the global situation with climate change and global warming. We have had delegations of Ukrainian experts going to Denmark to learn from Danish experts, so peer-to-peer experience. But what we really do is to share for free everything we know about how to regulate your economy the way we did. And the short story about what Denmark did is that in 30 years our economy grew by 50%. In the same period we learned how to spend less energy with the higher level of economic activity. And of course that's done by energy efficiency. And we are ready to share all that experience with Ukraine in different fields.
Ukraine intends to learn from Denmark's experience in managing the labor market. Indeed, unemployment rates in Denmark are almost half that of Germany and France. In this Scandinavian country, only 5% of the working-age population is looking for a new job. Its low level of unemployment can be explained by dialogue between the government, company owners, and employees. In 2018, the Ministry of Social Policy of Ukraine, supported by the Danish government, launched a 5-year project for the formation of an inclusive labor market.
Well, this thing about an inclusive labor market, or the Danish model, many call it, has been made very famous in recent years. And some call it flexicurity also. When we are defining it, we say we have a more flexible way of people leaving jobs. But on the other side of that, we do much more to make sure they get another job. Also, it's based on an old tradition we have for cooperation between employers and employees. We hope we can share also there a Danish experience in having a more free, well-functioning labor market to the benefit of everyone.
The most important factor in the development of political and economic cooperation is excellent mutual understanding between nations. According to the Danish ambassador to Ukraine, there is a lot in common between Danes and Ukrainians.
It's very easy to be the ambassador of Denmark in Ukraine. I think our people go well together. We have the same way of being relaxed, but also perhaps sometimes of being a bit stubborn. Have you heard of that? We are the same. We certainly don't like to be told by others what to think and what to do, and I think I've seen the same strong sentiment in Ukraine. I think much of your political dynamics in recent years. We have a good basis to develop further relations, and we do every day by tourism and other people-to-people contacts. And contacts between institutions is very rich on all levels. Perhaps even it goes back further than we believe. I do know that there are signs that Danish Vikings came here, so perhaps it already started then.
The voyages of Vikings inspired the ambassador's compatriots to canoe down the road from the Varangians to Greece. According to history books, the Vikings also avoided sailing on heavy vessels, as they were incorrectly portrayed in films. The true historic fact is that the Vikings sailed down rivers on light boats.
And I can tell you the story about a Danish priest who last year came paddling from the Baltic Sea all the way down through Belarus and to Ukraine along the Dnieper, out in the Black Sea and into the Bosporus, and ended up at the old Christian church of Hagia Sophia. He was received everywhere in the most positive way in Ukraine.
The ambassador himself often enjoys the panoramic views of Kiev from the water. Indeed, canoeing on the waters of the Dnipro River has become his favorite pastime while living here.
I did kayaking when I was young. I took it up again when I moved to New York in year 2000. So I got a kayak, more or less the same model I have here. It was a previous one. Then I moved to Belgrade. I was there for 5 years. I was also 5 years in Ankara. It was more difficult. The best I've had in any of my posts is what I have now in close to Hydro Park, because it's a real club. It's a wonderful river there. On the close to the left bank, the water is running more quietly. And there are beautiful lanes I can go between the islands, and I like to be alone in nature. It's a great pleasure. So it's recommended.